the president of the Trinidad Unified Teachers Association, Mr. Devanand Sinanan. Thank you so much for taking the time to come in this morning.
My pleasure, Rennie, Bishop, and thank you for your very kind words.
It is very true. You're deserving of it, and it's good to have you here. A lot of things that are confronting us this morning that we want to get clarity from you on. School is reopening. We've got discipline issues, safety issues. We've got a situation in Tobago that we want to look at. But let us start with this whole question of discipline in our schools. It is one of the things that knocked all of us for six last year when, with the use of technology, it came to the fore. And you said, Rennie, you all are surprised? We're not surprised. This has been coming for a long time, but it hit all of us, and suddenly it went out after the deserved attention. It went out of the headlines. One assumes or want to believe that we have seen some taming of the situation. Talk to me about disciplines in school as it relates to students, as it relates to deviant students. How have we moved with this as a result of what the minister did? Your organization suggested to him the confabs he had. Do we have a lessening of the discipline problem or an improvement in the discipline situation in schools?
Well, I don't have the stats to actually tell you that we've had a significant reduction, but there seems to be an abatement of the levels of indiscipline that we would have experienced in schools over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Some of the initiatives that would have been adopted by the current Minister of Education is bearing some fruit. Of course, some of those initiatives came from Tutor. The ideas would have been generated by Tutor, and we are happy that Minister Garcia does listen to what we are saying and these ideas that we would share with him.
It does help when you have a line minister who was a former teacher himself.
And former president of Tutor.
Indeed, yes.
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't think we can all say that it has been eradicated from our schools. As to how bad it is, we are yet to see. Of course, Rennie, I'm going back to the classroom come the 1st of December, so that I'm going to be faced with it head on. As a principal, I'll be the one in the hot seat to have to deal with all of it, the suspensions, the confiscation of the weapons and the fights and the gang warfare and what have you. So, I don't think any of us can claim that we have the solutions unilaterally to the problem of school violence, school indiscipline. It's a societal problem, and it is something that the society has to tackle head on, collectively, that is.
Panacea is not as easily available as the Pokemon.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You have a lot more looking to do in that case. Yeah. So let's talk in the area then. Some of the things that were introduced, one of them being putting aside a we were talking about it with my first guest, Senior Counsel Martin Daly, restorative justice in the case of the prison system. But in this case, we're looking at teaching our students the proper way to behave before we put them back in the general population. How many of those who were put in the special classes for, let's just call it modification? Yeah. What was the proper term you used in that case when you took them from the schools, put them in this place for retraining, realignment? What was it?
Like I said, I don't have numbers, but when we spoke to the minister about how the program was coming along, he lamented the fact that many of the students who were supposed to have gone to these centers for the rehabilitation, for the behavior modification, a lot of them don't go. The parents are simply not cooperating. In fact, when the minister calls for the parents and the child to meet with him, the Minister of Education and other officials of the Ministry of Education, to put our heads together, tutor officials, PTA officials, unfortunately, many of the students and the parents don't show up.
We find that sometimes if I put a commercial out, for instance, to an event, I probably reach about, 500,000 people, and I say, okay, if I get 10,000 of those paying attention, I'm good, and if I only get 5,000 coming, then I've done great. So sometimes you do things as a shot across the bow, and therein lies my area of inquiry. Would you say the action taken there have sort of sent a message to others who may be disposed to indulge in that, and they realize this and they're not playing? Let us
Absolutely. I would totally agree with that. And that is one of the things that we were trying to get across to the student population and to the population of parents, that the authorities, the Ministry of Education, will not tolerate student violence and student extreme forms of indiscipline. And here we have the Minister of Education who decided, listen, I'm going to take the bull by the horns here. We've been saying, listen, it's a small number of students, it's a small percentage of the student population. We need to take them out of the school temporarily and rehabilitate them, perform, the necessary interventions with the qualified experts and what have you. And that has indeed sent a very powerful message that this Minister of Education is not afraid to engage in extended suspensions. For many, many years, teachers and school administrators would have lamented the fact that you recommend extended suspension for a child, and it was almost never granted. This Minister of Education is indicating that, listen, he's prepared to, step into that realm and initiate extended suspensions. Of course, don't just leave the child out on the street, that you do something about correcting the offending behavior, and then you put the child back into the school system where they belong.
I am an adherent to the belief that if you're looking for omelets, you're going to break some eggs.
Absolutely.
And you live with
Absolutely.
that. Talk
Yes.
about safety of teachers. Teachers, because part of this discipline is not a disruption in the school only, but the fact that it got so bad that the safety of many teachers were in danger. An atmosphere of fear that continued inside of there, which of course undermines the learning environment. Speak to the level of comfort teachers feel now, because among the suggestions that came were some things that had to be put in place to make teachers more comfortable, i.e. if they contacted a police station, how the reaction was, the different levels they have to go to get things corrected, how long that takes, how has that been dealt with by the ministry under the new line minister. And I don't necessarily want to spend the attention on what the minister himself did, but the ministry as a whole taking the recommendations.
Yes, I would have to admit that there is that level of fear among many teachers in some of our schools. It is not, throughout the system. There are some schools where there is that level of fear, where teachers are afraid to walk the corridors all by themselves. They're afraid to, pull up on students, admonish students, because in the past you would find, well, maybe some students will probably just ignore you. Now you have students who are brave enough to actually issue threats and carry them out in some instances, because many of them have the support of gangs and external negative elements. And therefore, as a teacher, you now have to be very careful about how you approach, students and how you treat with their, violent and indisciplined behavior. Sometimes you have to work with other colleagues. You don't just approach students all by yourself.
It is that level of awareness that I thought came in the recommendations that was made, the recommendations made by tutor and or discussed, that even the police will understand that a teacher making a complaint about somebody, it must be done with a strict confidence, because the teacher must leave the schoolyard.
Absolutely.
So that the police would respond better, patrol the perimeter, the surrounding area a lot better, in addition to understanding that any report made by a teacher on a particular student is something to be kept very confidential. There is not that level of comfort yet with that.
Well, it's mixed. In some instances, you would find that the police work very well and very closely with certain schools, and we have identified certain quote-unquote high-risk schools, and police officers do go in and they do work with teachers from time to time. Of course, they have their limitations as well in terms of manpower, in terms of resources. Remember, they are not really trained to treat with students in a school environment. Their remit is somewhat different,
right?
And therefore, we have to be very careful when we bring police officers into the school compound.
I have a very serious problem with this, but as far as patrolling the surroundings of the school and ensuring that, because most bullies feel really good when they have their people close to hand.
Yes.
And if you make sure you create a demarc line between those who perpetuate this sort of gang business and the student body, then these bullies are less apt to act up in school, I think.
Well, unfortunately, I have to say that the police in Trinidad and Tobago have not really gotten a handle on the whole issue of gang warfare in the country. So while certain police officers will give you the assurance that they will do the necessary patrols and they will do whatever that they can within their power to ensure that there's safe passage to and from school for teachers, unfortunately, in some of our communities, the gang warfare is so extreme that even the police is apparently helpless in some instances. as is evident by the crime statistics. That is, really, not something we should be proud of. So that is a national problem. The Ministry of National Security and the other arms of the state, they have to work together to, grapple with that problem. But in the context of the school environment, from my own personal experience, I will say in the schools that I would have worked in, the police is usually very supportive, and they do respond as best as they can, and they do assist from time to time with, issues of violence and discipline in schools.
In case you're just joining us this morning on Brunch, my guest is the president of the Trinidad Unified Teachers Association, Devanand. Sinanan. It's really good to have him here this morning. We are talking about a number of issues. We hit discipline, we hit safety. Let's talk about the announcement from the Education Minister, Anthony Garcia. He revealed last week that pupils who enter secondary school for the first time as first formers in the new term will not be given a personal laptop. Instead, each school will receive 100 laptops, which will stay on site, first of all, for use equally by all students. 50 laptops will be for the school's Form 1 pool, while the other 50% will be used for the Form 2 pool. Students will not be given a personal laptop. Garcia said laptops will be the property of the school, which we understand. Do you see this measure as prudent or in any way retarding the education of school children, Mr. Sinanan?
We do support the position that was adopted by the Ministry of Education regarding the one laptop per child initiative. We would have cautioned the Ministry of Education over the years about some of the shortcomings of that one laptop per child initiative. And when Minister Garcia took over, we would have shared those concerns with him. He did indicate to us that he has a team of persons looking at the initiative, reviewing, what would have transpired in the last 5 years. And before they make any further decision, they are going to assess the situation. We are happy to know that the suggestions that were offered by Tutor would apparently have been taken into account. Why do we adopt our position? David Subran, Dr. Subran, has written a beautiful article in today's edition of one of the daily newspapers, and I think it will be worth reading to understand exactly where we are coming from. Basically, we have always indicated that giving children laptops doesn't necessarily translate into improved student learning outcomes by themselves. A number of things must also be put in place, and some has to be put in place even before you give the laptops. One is the training of teachers. You don't expect teachers to incorporate this device in the teaching and learning process just like that. Being able to use a laptop for your personal purposes and using it to deliver curriculum, a wide range of curriculum, all the the 18 to 20 different subjects that we have offered at the secondary school level, you don't expect that to magically happen. You have to teach teachers to incorporate the technology in the teaching and learning process, and that was not done. Now, might I add that you don't give a 1 day or 2 day training workshop to teachers and expect them to do that, all right? There is actually a 1 year postgrad diploma in education technology that is offered by the School of Education. So people go through this process for an entire year, learning how to use the technology to deliver curriculum. That's one. Two, you need to have a certain amount of infrastructure present in the school. Wi-Fi access, the laptops need to be networked, you need to have support personnel to deal with, the technical aspects of the laptops. Because you could appreciate that as a teacher, I have 35 students in front of me, and they all have laptops open in front of them. But if those laptops are not networked, and I have no control over what they have on that screen in front of them, obviously, that is not helping me as a teacher to deliver curriculum. And that facility was just never, there for teachers to use.
And that networking thing also works in the area that the teacher should have the ability to go computers 1 to 25 assigned to him and see what the kids are looking at.
That's right.
So because that monitoring
using
is
the
necessary.
technology in the classroom to deliver the curriculum is critical, all right? That capacity just wasn't there. And in addition to that, we would have pointed the Ministry of Education to 2 global studies. One that was done in 2012 by the IADB, the One Laptop Per Child Initiative, was reviewed in 2012. There was a study done in Peru, and the conclusion was that laptops by themselves, just doesn't do, it doesn't improve student learning outcomes. And then the OECD did another study in 2014, which essentially came to the same conclusion. I haven't seen it, but I understand UWI also did a study.
I got the Inter-American Development Bank, but what was the other organization you mentioned?
The OECD. Organization for Economic Cooperation and
Thank you.
Development. All right. Now, assuming that laptops were given to children to improve their student learning outcomes is, another matter. All right, because we are not quite sure that that was the objective of the program in the first place. But we were making our comments based on that premise. All right, we were assuming that was in fact the reason. Of course, we know in the realm of politics in Trinidad and Tobago, that may not have been a wise assumption on our part.
I was about to ask what a ignorant, gullible young man like me would think would be another reason for the introduction of laptops.
Absolutely. Now, we can also look at it from a different perspective. This year, the students who wrote CSEC, they would have been the first batch of students to have received laptops 5 years ago. Have we looked at the CSEC results? Have we been able to discern any significant improvement in the performance of the students at the CSEC? The answer is no. All right? So that we had 5 years of this program, we need to do that kind of evaluation and that kind of assessment before we continue it. And again, we commend the Ministry of Education for adopting that position. We've always said that a good, fully functional IT lab in a school can do the trick for us, given what we are looking for at this point in time.
Two facts here. Thank you so much for bringing that sobering input, the one of inference that you cannot go about willy-nilly doing things because they look technologically cool to do without understanding that you've got to have the support mechanism. You cannot have laptops given to people without firewalls, for instance, that will prohibit kids from going other places. You cannot have them where the teacher has no idea what they're looking at, and they may be snickling and giggling at something else, distracted totally, and or be taking areas for work given them and basically copying and pasting.
Well, I can also say, from my personal experience as a principal, I have had to confiscate several laptops from children because they've been using it for porn.
Yes.
And they're using it to play games and what have you.
Yes.
And notwithstanding what the politicians would have said and high officials, that was the report that was coming through from teachers throughout the system.
Precisely.
That the laptops were not being used for education purposes.
Precisely. And then if you have a child take this laptop home and they have access to Wi-Fi, then it can continue this excursion into everything but schoolwork.
In fact, let me say something that may not sound very palatable. The laptops came with cameras, webcams. And guess what? Our very brilliant children were using it to film themselves.
Yep.
And I would have had to call in parents on a number of occasions to point out these things to them.
They should not come with cameras to do what? Yeah.
So at the end of the day, when we make investments in education, we must look at value for money.
You see, that's why it's always good to have you here, because these are sides of an issue that folks don't always look at. It is one thing to say it is a learning instrument. Yes, any computer is a learning instrument. Yes, technology must be taken advantage of, but technology must be accompanied by common sense safeguards.
That's right.
Which brings me into the other area of cell phones. What is your feeling on cell phones in the classroom?
Okay, from a trade union perspective, we have been trying to educate our members that the technology must be incorporated. We cannot ask children in this day and age to divorce that technology from their existence in the classroom. We have to stop burying our heads in the sand. And as a leader, sometimes I have to, be brave enough / foolish enough to, give licks to my own members. This is one of those instances. We can't simply say to children, you cannot come to school with cell phones. Listen, these children, from the time their eyes are open in the morning, from a very tender age, these are devices that are an integral part of their existence. The challenge for us teachers, as the educated ones, is to figure out how do we now incorporate this technology in the teaching and learning process. Now, there's a ton of literature out there in terms of what you can do and how you can do that. Because let's look at it from the other perspective. The Ministry of Education advised that children they have the right to ownership of property, and we can't deny them that right. That is a right that is enshrined in the Constitution. And when they come to school, the ministry's policy basically states that they must keep the cell phones switched off. Now, when you have laws you have to figure out, how do you enforce them? Is it realistic to enforce such a law? You have a student population of 7, 8, 900 children in a school. How do you ensure that all of them, and I can tell you all of them are, coming to school with cell phones. How do you ensure that that is in fact the case? All right, you'd spend so much time in this negative way. We've had instances of, okay, you take them, you label them, you put them in a box at the start of the school day, and when the child is going home in the evening, then you have to give it. Again, that takes up a lot of precious teaching and learning time.
You should have been in my conversation with my researcher yesterday. I had to go through exactly that and take a lot of blows, how impractical and how resource heavy it is.
Now, look at it from a positive perspective, all right? This can be turn from a negative into a positive, all right? It is a fact of life globally, all right? We as teachers now have to get with it. We have to get with the times. And like I said, we have been, encouraging our members to pull down the literature. Unions globally are going that way in terms of advising their members about how to use these cell phones in the classroom. All right, you have to be creative. You have to think out of the box now. Remember when I became a teacher 26, 27 years ago, that wasn't a reality. So when I did my teacher training, that would not have featured as part of my teacher training. But the Ministry of Education can do more also in terms of encouraging and teaching us, the teachers, in terms of how we can get over this barrier. Rather than treat it as a negative development, let us look at it as a positive development.
And there's an area too. The universities, for instance, they block outside links via laptops. Even when we're talking about cell phones, which is where we are now, you can have an ISP and you agree for a certain jamming.
That's right.
You as you said, it is one thing to have the legislation, but you've got to think of, okay, how are we going to implement this? Then maybe some conversation need to take place that in a school zone there is let's just say a jam, some kind of jamming mechanism that's put in place, and it is very possible, allowing just like the principal or a certain chain of computers, a certain bank of computers to access the internet, and that way you don't deprive you allow the
bear in mind that parents are adamant that their children must have these cell phones, that these cell phones are very important. They must be able to communicate with their children.
Why? While they're in a classroom? I mean, what is it? They want to talk to them in a classroom?
Absolutely, yes. They do insist.
Well, maybe they should keep them at home. I mean, what do you mean you want to talk to them in the classroom?
We've had this quarrel with many parents throughout the country, and we've had to advise our members, listen, at the end of the day, school law cannot supersede the law of the land. If the law of the land says that they have the right to property and the enjoyment thereof, therefore we have to now bear that in mind when we develop laws and guidelines for the operations of schools.
Lobby the legislators, because that makes absolutely no sense. What is a parent going to tell me? I want to talk to him while he's in the middle of what the teacher is telling him. And that is why, for some reason, the mechanisms must be worked out in some way that these cell phones are not to be used in school, or there is a heavy penalty for anyone found using it. Okay, you must have it. But I mean, for parents to even suggest that is something that baffled me for a long time. In case you just tuned in, it's 32 minutes after 11 o'clock. My guest is Devanand, Sinanan. He is the president of the Trinidad Unified Teachers Association. We are talking about that. Trinidad and Tobago. I apologize, Tobago. Good morning to you. Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. Tutor. I get it right. And we're talking about that very thorny issue of cell phones. Okay, I'm going to leave that right there because, unless legislation is put in place, we're not going anywhere. You did say, rightly so, Trinidad and Tobago. Let us go to Tobago.
Yes.
There is a warning that if the Division of Education does not take heed, then something is going to happen in the future. Teachers at the Roxborough Secondary School walked off their job. They were citing a number of outstanding issues, including non-operational library, no internet, lack of remedial teachers, and that sort of thing. What is the status of those negotiations with Tobago schools?
Well, I haven't spoken to the Tobago officer on the matter as yet. Mr. Kerr, he's normally in charge in Tobago. And if and when it is necessary, he will indicate to us, we need to intervene. Normally in Tobago, those issues are dealt with at the level of the Division of Education, Youth Affairs and Sport. So we've been hearing that there was something amiss at that school, but I don't have specific details. And we are, of course, looking at the issue come tomorrow morning when teachers go out to school, and if they feel that the school is not in a state of readiness for occupation, if it is not in a position where they can discharge their duties and their functions, then they know what they can do under the law. And if and when the union has to be brought into the picture, if their rights are being violated in any way, if they're being threatened in any way, then we will get into the picture and we will act accordingly.
The education secretary said that the division is in talks with you on the setting up of a committee. Have you all at least agreed on that, or that is still to be agreed
Yes,
upon?
we have had those discussions a while back. Actually, we met we do have regular meetings with the division, and including the Secretary for Education, Youth Affairs and Sport. And I must say that we do have a good working relationship with Mr. Cadet. I do have his number, so I can call him, at will, and vice versa. So yes, we would want to continue those dialogue, to dialogue those issues at the level of the DS. And if it becomes necessary and we need to take it somewhere else, we will.
Devanand Sinanan is with me. When you're governing, you look for a public-private partnership when you want to move things along,
absolutely.
cognizant that no one entity can get something done. In the case of teachers, it would be the teacher's-parent collaboration that must be encouraged, because let me not even opine on this. Let me, in fact, ask you, what has the response been by parents? Have you seen an increase of interest that it would become via, I guess, your PTA meetings and so on, a greater interest shown by parents towards their children, particularly in this environment, or is it still wanting or waning?
I think it is waning. We have more and more parents who are not acknowledging and understanding the critical role that they have to play in the education of their children. They're abdicating the responsibility to everyone else, the school, the community, the state. And despite our best efforts, in fact, there has been some initiatives by the Ministry of Education to have parent outreach programs and parent education programs. It has not been as successful as the ministry would have liked. Unfortunately, many of the parents that you really want to reach out to, they don't come. They're not prepared to make the necessary sacrifice to come to the school, to sit and work with the teachers and to work with the ministry officials. When it does happen, if you get parents who are willing to come and work with the teachers in school, it can work miracles, all right, in terms of turning around the behavior, the offending behavior of the child, etc. Because in many instances, the offending behavior that the child displays in school had its genesis in the home and in the community. And therefore, if you are to tackle the problem, you need to get to the root, and the root is in the home and the community. We as teachers, we can't go into the homes, all right? We don't have that authority under the law. We need to work with other arms of the state in order to do that. But it would be so much easier if we can get the parents to come into the schools and work with us. Now, we found there's a big disconnect between the leadership of the NPTA and what actually happens on the ground with many parents. You have in many, many schools...
The NPTA, just so our listeners know, is the National Parent Teachers Association. Yes. Please go ahead.
You have in many schools a PTA existing in theory. You have a student body of 700-800, and if you call a PTA meeting outside of school hours in the evening and what have you, if you get 30-40 parents, you're getting a lot. All right? Now, despite the best efforts of the leadership of the NPTA, that has not changed over the decades. All right? And we therefore need to figure out, how do we get parents to understand they are a stakeholder. They have a very critical and very important role to play in the overall education and development of the child.
Well, let me ask you
the most important teacher in the first place.
Indeed, but you will agree that you speak to any parent and they will tell you, my child is the most important thing to me.
As the child,
then,
as it should be.
Then where is the disconnect? If they understand, is it a case of commitment to say that most of them are working and it's inconvenient or it conflicts with the job? I mean, I'm trying to understand what we both know, what we all know. My child is my most important concern right now. And they genuinely mean that. It is not just lip service. Most 99% of the cases, that is genuine. But there is a disconnect when you have less than a third participant participation. A third is being optimistic. Less than a quarter participation in PTA meetings. So dealing with the real problem, you see, the root of the problem, we have to look at the variables. One of the variables would have to be either it is inconvenient when these things are called. Two, it is failing to attract the attention of the parents who think their time can be spent elsewhere because the meetings are not sufficient to their advantage, they believe. What have you discussed among yourselves to find that is the cause for the disconnect to the level it is?
Okay, let me start by saying, show me a parent who is genuinely concerned about their child's education, and I'll show you a child who will eventually succeed. It is a question of the premium, the value that parents place on their child's education. Some parents will place all the value and will make the necessary sacrifices, is prepared to make the necessary sacrifices of time, effort, energy, money. Mm-hmm. Education is the most important thing that you can give to your child. But you have to understand that would not happen in a vacuum. It would not happen miraculously. And you cannot abdicate that responsibility for your child's education to anybody else. You have to take the leading role in that process. You have to be there, questioning the teacher, questioning the school, working with the school, all right? Doing your part at home, ensuring, for example, that at home the child can also be a student. All right, making sure the environment is such that it is conducive for the child to be able to get quiet time, to be able to get a place where they can, they can study, they can read, and the parent can sit with them and say, let me see your books. What did you do in school today? And if you're not satisfied, if you are concerned, then you should be in school the next day. And if you don't place that kind of premium and that kind of value on the acquisition of education, I'm afraid you will find every excuse not to be at the PTA meeting, not to come to school when the teacher is requesting your presence, because in some of our schools, and I say some, you would make phone calls. Of course, the number that they give you when the child is registered ceases to exist, within 2 or 3 months. So you're calling this number and nobody's answering. You send letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's no response. Nobody is showing up. In extreme cases, we have had to enlist the assistance of the police and call the police and say, listen, can you take this letter and find this parent and see if you can get them to come in school?
Which raises a question I want
Bring
to
them
get
in
to you
school.
and your child welfare or something, because
That's right.
This is endangering the well-being of a minor. Is there an agency that you can go to before you go to the police in case you are unable to get to the parent of a child?
Well, our guidance officers, the Student Support Services Division, they sometimes will visit homes. But we do have a shortage of such personnel in the system. All right, the whole Student Support Services Division of the Ministry of Education is woefully, inadequate, and that's another story. But again, the bottom line is, if the parent is prepared to make that kind of sacrifice, all right, you have to. Unfortunately, you see, we've grown accustomed to the gimme syndrome. All right, the child has to get free, breakfast, lunch, books. Somewhere along the line, we've conveyed the message that the business of educating the child is not my responsibility. All right, people have to understand. Listen, you have to tell your children from the time they can understand. Education is your ticket to a better life, and that we must be prepared to make sacrifices to ensure that you become educated. Mr. Bishop, how many young people how many adults who would have told you they came from households where when it was a question of buying food and buying books, your parents chose books. Yes. All right? Yes. Such was the premium and value they placed on the acquisition of education. That, children didn't get that kind of freeness back then, but they made sure they sent their children to school. They made all the sacrifices they could have possibly made. As they say, band their belly, eat very little. But because education was seen from that kind of perspective, children eventually went on to make it.
I hear the passion of a parent and the frustration of a teacher coming on all salient observations. I believe that parents are aware of this. But it comes back to what you're saying. You can be aware of it. The lip service sounds really good, but it is the will to get it done.
Do it. I mean, it's all well and good to say my child is very important to me, but you have to demonstrate that. You have to demonstrate the fact that your child is so important to you that you are prepared to make personal sacrifices to ensure that your child has a bright future, that your child can become something, that your child can rise above all these challenges that you're lamenting about, all right? All these problems, the issues of poverty and what have you. You have to believe that your child has what it takes to surmount these obstacles. And with your continued support, your child will make it. Very importantly, also, you have to tell your child, listen, I'm investing in you. I want returns on my investment.
Make demands. You must make demands. Yes,
you must hold the child accountable.
Passion and dedication. You're hearing that of Devanand Sinanan, who is the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. And we are talking about that very important area of parents' participation in their child's education, making that sacrifice. So there would be variables in just about everything we do in life, but we just have to prioritize. And once we do that, there should not be an issue in that area, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Some of the things that tutor would like to see happening in this new year, I think you would be smiling if, in fact, the report we have, or the reports that I have heard, is that all schools will be open come this school term. And some of the areas you would like to see improved to assist not just the teachers, but also the students in moving forward this year. What are the primary objectives that a tutor would like to see happen this year?
Well, like you said, we have been given the assurance from the Ministry of Education that all will be in place for all schools to be open tomorrow. And I have known Mr. Garcia for a long time. He's a man of integrity, and his word does mean something, so I'm holding him to his word. Of course, I would have had to indicate to him, one, that we were a little bit disappointed that the vacation repair program didn't get off the ground at the start of the holidays as we were told it would have. That instances where contractors were being owed monies, that those monies were identified and the contractors would have been paid so that they can continue to work in terms of construction work in many of the schools. That didn't apparently happen. We were told that the money issue is still the bugbear here.
Yeah, because there's still an investigation going on with the FCL.
Yes.
And of course, if you have investigations going on and you have a lot of folks owed money, you have to verify, which is what I believe the minister has said that they are doing. They have audits going on to ensure that those who build the state did in fact do the work.
That's right. So we wouldn't get into those details, but we did indicate that we were disappointed that, okay, you've got your job is governance, all right? You have your thing to do. We will not tell you how to do your job.
Get me my
but
schools.
when it comes to schools, we want to know that schools are ready, for opening, and they're safe and secure for teachers and students and what have you. The other part is that, of course, as a union, we would have reminded the Honorable Minister that what he would have said and done in the past, we would continue to do. That is, if teachers go out to schools tomorrow and the school is safe or unsecure for whatever reason, they have certain rights under the law, and we will advise them to exercise those rights. And if any attempt is made to victimize them, threaten them, take them to task, a disciplinary action being brought against them for exercising their rights under the law, the union is there to protect.
You hand me a bit of you're old enough to know Tony Ricardo. Sounds like take warning. Definitely, Sinanan. The situation as it relates to sex in schools. That's an area that, we sort of covered it earlier when we talked about discipline, we talked about security in school, but it's a real problem by itself.
Yeah, real problem, but not new. It's been around for a long, long time. As a society, we've buried our heads in the sand when it comes to these things. Teenagers, sex education, teaching our young people about responsible behavior, taking charge of their bodies, the consequences of such behavior. I have heard too many people say that we need to teach it in school. Hell, we've been teaching it in school for a long, long time. It is a part of the integrated science curriculum from Form 1. It is a part of the biology curriculum. It is a part of the social studies curriculum. Teachers, the physical education teachers, teach, those issues as well. So that I don't know where people are coming from when it comes to, we need to put it in the curriculum. It's been in the curriculum for a long, long time. Guess what? We have a disconnect between what is happening in the school and what is not happening in the homes and the communities.
Mm.
This is not something that is discussed in the homes. It is
Back
not
to the homes, yes.
treated with in the homes, that it ought to be treated in that responsible professional manner. What is being done is not being augmented in terms of the homes and the communities. So you need that kind of complementary action between the school and the home and the community in terms of educating young people about responsible behavior.
You alluded to that a bit earlier, and I'm glad that you reiterated at this point, because for the most part, there are many parents who believe that the school is there to nurture, raise their children. The school is there to educate the children and, of course, raise them in collaboration with the primary responsible person, which is the parent.
Yes.
And I think that's a misunderstanding. They believe that. So sex education, for instance, is something that must be encouraged in the home.
In the homes, in the communities, the other education institutions of the state, the media, the community groups, the churches, they all have their part to play.
Yes.
All right. And the influence that these other education institutions wield, depending on the topic, is sometimes a lot more significant than the influence that the school can wield.
Indeed.
In these areas.
Right now, as it relates to pregnancy in the schools, young girls pregnant in the schools, what are the psychologists suggesting, recommending how they best be treated with? How do we treat with that right now? Young girls in pregnancy in the schools.
Okay, the ministry's policy that is out for us to be guided by is that if a young lady becomes pregnant, of course, according to the Sexual Offences Act, if you as a teacher, you suspect that a student, all right, once they're underage, is engaging in sexual activity, your job is to report it. You must bring that information to the attention of the police. That's the Sexual Offences Act, failing which we can be taken to task according to the law. I think it's $12,000 fine and 6 months imprisonment. That is one aspect of it. If students become pregnant, we will allow them to, have the child, and when the student is ready, we have to take them back into the school to continue their education. Pregnancy should not be used as an excuse to deny a young lady the right to their education. Of course, you would now have to work, even closer with the parent or guardian and other organizations, because now you're dealing with a much more complex problem, so that the guidance officers and the teachers, you have to now get other agents of the state involved in the process.
Devanand, Sinanan, as always, I thank you so much for taking up your Sunday to come down here with us this morning.
My pleasure.
I hope, as you have done before, that our listeners had all their questions answered. I did not ask you if we would open the telephones, but we have utilized all our time here this morning. I am optimistic that with the line minister, you're not because he was a past president of tutor, not because he is an educator himself, but because he also has the family passion, the overall preparation to hold the ministry. He does, that we see some progress there. I am hoping that your comments about parents taking hold of their responsibility in the home really impacts on somebody this morning, because of the end of the day, absent the parents, there is but so much the schools can do.
That's right.
The National Parent Teachers Association, they too, maybe also one may look at a different way of doing this. Has the thought crossed anyone in the instance of these PTA meetings to have them in like FaceTime? Let them use technology. Let the schools use technology to wire in. We were talking about embracing technology. Let's talk about that for a bit, because everybody's got a cell phone. And maybe one of the areas we could think about doing this is to have FaceTime, Skype, whatever, that folks can actually have, be part of these meetings.
Well, I can't point to specific instances, but I am sure that there are PTAs that, engage in technology in the execution of their duties. In many of the schools, you do get a core of parents, the executive, who are usually very supportive and working with teachers. In some instances, I think some PTAs in some schools, they have their own Facebook and websites and what have you. So it depends on the school that you're dealing with.
But you will agree there is nothing like the real time thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And having it in real time, it now removes. And I'm trying to be fair here because it's kind of difficult at a mother, for instance, working Port of Spain, and the child is schooling in Barataria, and she has to leave the job at a certain time to get up their transportation at all, and it could be problematic. But since we are all in concert that we must embrace technology, maybe we should seriously take a serious look at that, because now they can use the phone and be part of this. Not only that, by the way, as is the case this morning, Mr. Sinanan's interview here will be available on our website. You can go up by Monday evening and pull it down and hear all that he had to say this morning. But the same thing we can do for parents.
Absolutely.
Because if there is a PTA meeting and it's posted up there, they can now pull it on demand.
And they can make their contribution. More importantly, again, we have to get employers to be prepared to give parents time off to go to school during school time, during school hours, to treat with issues affecting their children. One of the very successful programs that I personally would have tried back then is a Bring Your Parent to School Day. Now, that is separate and apart from Parents' Day. That is separate and apart from a PTA meeting. That is where the child bring their parent to school, and the parents sit with the child during the course of the day in the classroom, of course, with the permission of the teacher and school authorities.
And all on one day.
Yes, observe exactly. Because very often the child that is at home is not the same as the child that is in school. And some parents are surprised to hear and to see what children do, their own children, what they say and do and how they behave in the school environment.
And parents get a better understanding that they must be a compliment to the teacher, not be adversarial.
And they get a better understanding of what we are trying to do in the school so that they can work with us.
Devanand, Sinanan, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me this morning. Have a safe trip back up. Please go ahead.
Let me also take the opportunity to wish teachers and students the very best for the coming academic year. I wish them a very productive and enjoyable academic term and year ahead. I
join with you on that. On that note, I want to thank my guests for being here this morning, Devanand Sinanan. I also thank Burton Sankarali for being here on the topic of Venezuela. Also, Senior Counsel Martin Daly, thank you so much for your input this morning, as always. I invite you to join me again next week at 10 o'clock right here on 107.7. I am on, of course, every morning from 6 until 9 o'clock with my co-host, Michelle Borrell, for the morning show. I hope that you have a very nice day. Leave you saluting King Austin. I could have grabbed Who Is Going to Guard the Gods at this point, but I think when you hear Progress, it reminds you more than anything else as to this man and this composition from Winston Joker Devine. That's outstanding and will always be up there as one of the true classics of Calypso. My name is Rennie Bishop. Have a good day.